Morning, everyone. We're just checking our list.
Paul is here. Yeah, Paul is here. No, Richard. Oh, no, Richard's supposed to be here too. And Allison.
Good morning, everyone. We are ready to call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum of 5 people. And I'm just going to say, just for in case you can't see everyone, who's online, there's myself and Paul Kehoe here. And then there's the 3 of you, which is Andrew, Kathy, and Roy. Right? We had 2 more who said they were going to attend, and they will join later. We don't know. All right. So you've got roll call.
Completed.
All right, excellent. So we have call the meeting to order. So we have the adoption of the agenda. So resolved that the minutes of the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting held on March 28, 2023 be received and approved as printed. I need someone to. Oh, geez. I don't have an agenda resolution. That's why. Okay, I'm sorry about that. All right. I have a book ahead in front of me here. So I will back up and we need to look at the adoption of the agenda. Resolved that the agenda for June 22nd, 2023 Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting be adopted as presented. And as you know, there was a new one that was sent out. All right. So I need someone to move.
Kathy.
So moved.
Okay. So I see Kathy has moves and second by Andrew. Any comments or questions on the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I'm gonna say, oh yeah, so the motion is carried. All right, thank you. All right, next we move on to declarations of interest. Are there any written declarations of interest? No. All right. We move on then to approval of the minutes. Excellent. So now resolved that the minutes of the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting, excuse me, held on March 28, 2023 be received and approved as printed. I need someone to move.
So moved.
Andrew moves. Roy seconds. Right, who does seconds? Are there any comments or questions on the minutes? All right. So can I see a show of hands for approval of the minutes? All right, the motion is carried. All right, moving on to the next item. And then we go, okay. All right, so the intent of the next item, which is an update on the pay scales, is that Sally will introduce the topic. We will then go in camera. I'll have a motion to go in camera for the presentation and discussion. The presentation by Joanne Glazer, who's here from Cornerstone, for any discussion, and then we will come out of camera to vote on it, right? That's the intent. So are there any comments or questions on that process before we begin the process? All right. So let's move then, or let's look at the presentation on updated pay scales, or an introduction on the updated pay scales from Sally.
So thank you. So this has been a process that's been ongoing for the better part of 3 years now. The corporation identified as a priority that it needed to ensure that staff in the organization were had appropriate job descriptions that reflected the jobs they were performing. B, that then those job descriptions were evaluated using the corporation's board-approved evaluation matrix. And then that scoring be used to identify where they should fall on the pay scale. And then lastly, for jobs where we've had difficulty attracting talent or keeping talent to look at and complete a market assessment. So over the past 3 years, almost every single job in the organization has gone through that process. And the prior board approved several changes and authorized management to, where necessary, go off grid to attract or keep talent. And the result is that our pay scale looks quite frankly a bit discombobulated from what it did 3 years ago, and it really needed to be updated to reflect all these changes. So we worked with Cornerstone's Management Solutions over the past 3 years during this process. Joanne Glazer, who's here today, facilitated the review of all the job descriptions and the evaluation process. So we really appreciated her guidance around the management table and leading the management team through that evaluation process. And so we asked her to look at the pay scales because we needed her expertise, obviously, to help us in recrafting the pay scales to make sure that they were fair, equitable, met current standard practices for how one develops a pay scale. And so she worked with the treasurer, Stacy, and I on that process. And what she's going to present to you in camera is a pay scale that she developed for us in consultation with Stacy and I. And so she'll explain the rationale for the pay scale that you're going to see and answer any questions you may have about it. For the in-camera session, because obviously all the management team in this room and others are on that pay scale, we'll leave the room and leave it to you and Joanne to discuss. And then once you're finished having your discussions with Joanne, we'll come back into the room and I'll stop the recording of the session before leaving the room, and then I'll resume when I come back in. So if somebody could just come out after you're ready to come back in out of camera, we'll leave you to it, as it were. So before I leave the room, though, does anybody have any initial questions about the process we followed and the reason we're here today? Okay.
All right, great.
I'm just going to give you my motion.
All right, thank you. All right, so now we have the motion to move into camera. It's resolved that the committee move to in-camera session for discussion of the following matter: labor relations or employee negotiations. And further resolved that Sally McIntyre remain in the room.
No, that should not have been there.
No?
I'm leaving.
You're leaving, okay. I'm eliminating the last item, which is says from and further resolve that. So resolved that the committee move to in-camera session for discussion of the following matter: labor relations or employee negotiations. So I need someone to move. So I see Paul Kehoe moves. I need someone to second moving into camera.
Second.
I see Andrew has a faster internet connection, so I think so he seconded the motion. All in favor?
I assure you, I do not have a faster internet
Okay.
connection.
I think the motion is carried to move into camera, so I'm going to ask this staff to please leave and to stop recording. Again. There we go. All right, so everyone's back in the room now. There is a comment that Joanne will go back to the spreadsheet, and anything that looks or is set as, in quotes, off grid, we do not want to use that term. And she is going to package it into sub-levels such that the salary ranges are shown as being just part of the salary scale, but at a, as Roy had suggested, a level 3.5 or a level 4.2, because there's a concern about, even though we know we're paying market rates for some of these people, that really what we're saying is they are in their own salary scale because of the market competition. So we're not changing anything. It's just how it will look, and because, yes, how it's packaged. That's it. So with Joanne, we'll work with staff before it's presented to the board.
Okay.
Okay.
If I could ask one question?
Yes.
Are you 100% clear on? I just want to make sure, because I can't work with her on it and advise her.
Right.
So I'm just maybe looking that if there's any question that maybe can
Yeah,
the
she
board
can-
agreed or the committee agreed that she can follow up with you?
Yeah, you can follow, but I think she's pretty, yeah. I think
Okay.
we're good. Yeah, so you can send me what you come up with before the board meeting in July, what I can't remember which date.
10th.
10th, okay, July 10th. Okay, Jim? Okay. So with that, I will read the resolution. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve the updated salary scale as presented and to approve the phased implementation as described in this report. So I need someone to move.
Kathy?
Kathy moves. I need someone to second.
Andrew,
Andrew seconds. All in favor?
Carried.
All right, the motion is carried. Thank you. Excellent. All right, good discussion. Now, what am I doing now? Oh, yes. So now we're moving on to the update of MVCA's policy and procedures report. And Sally, you're going to give us an overview. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Joanne. So, Conservation Ontario provides template documents to all the conservation authorities to work from. And over the time, they get tailored by each of the CAs to meet the needs of the organization and the direction of individual boards at those CAs. And ideally, all the documents are developed in a manner that's easy to reference over time. Because certain changes have happened the way they have unfolded. Here at MVCA, I don't know all the details because I've only been here 4 years, but it's been very difficult to track approved policy, is the truth of the matter, because it's not all contained in one document. We have found as users of current policy that there are elements of policies where there's inconsistencies. And these are obviously problematic, especially in, for example, the employee manual, where you have conflicting policy on how you're to apply certain things to staff and the like. And so, we've really had a good look at the documents we have, and we had started to move any policies, quite frankly, that we found that we went, oh, we have a policy on X, because there's been huge changeover at the senior management level. That continuity and knowledge wasn't necessarily there in the past 4 years. So as I've discovered policy, I've tried to get it in a place where we know it is so that we can reference and use it. But Stacy and I went on training recently on, actually it was mostly on Robert's Rules of Order, but during that training, we talked about bylaws, policies, the management of these sorts of documents. And we got really good direction on how we should approach this. And so what you're seeing in this report is basically what we are advised to do in that training, which is to keep our bylaws as our bylaws. Any additional policies approved by the board that aren't strictly governance related at that sort of Conservation Authority Act level, I'll say, that we should have a policy manual, and that what we've been appending to our bylaws, we should move into that manual. And what we've discussed around the management team is that we really need to do a comprehensive review of all these policies and bring them to you in a phased manner over time to address all these either things that are dated or inconsistent and the like. So really what I'm tabling with you here today are some essential changes that need to be made based upon all the regulatory changes that I need to ensure are addressed in our administrative bylaw now, but also set a framework for you to enable us to move forward with this exercise. The one thing I didn't touch on is that another item that trend that we noticed in both the review of and application of these policy documents is that there's a lot of administrative processes embedded in them. And so we really want to disentangle board policy from day-to-day operational procedural matters. So as part of the review we're looking to do, we want to identify and pull out anything that we would say is really of an operational nature that we would not want to have to come back to the board to obtain approval for if we wanted to change a certain process or form and the like. So to enable a transparent removal of those elements from existing policy, I put forward in the report a set of criteria that I think would help us in doing our review. And I think would also help on a go-forward basis in making sure that as we're writing new policy and bringing items to the board, that these criteria give staff clear direction on what should be brought to the board, that you've looked at these criteria, and if you agree with them, anything that falls within these criteria would be brought to you. Of course, that wouldn't mean that other matters couldn't be brought to you, but that would be at the discretion of the management team, whether we thought that, it would be in the best interest of the organization, obviously, to bring them to, at minimum, your attention or for your decision. So on pages 2 and 3 are the proposed criteria. They're very closely aligned to the Conservation Authorities Act. So obviously where the act says something must come to the board, that's those criteria, the criteria include those items. But the ones that I wanted to highlight to you, I'm just going to walk through. So item number 3, proposed changes to the scope of MVCA programs and services. So that would be the exercise we've been going through over the past 2 years in terms of scoping out category 2 and 3 programs and services. If we're changing direction on, core category 1 programming. And I say scope because then the assumption would be if you've given approval for us to deliver a particular program and services, the how we deliver that, the operational mechanics of how that unfolds would be left to the management team to implement. So that's why the focus in number 3 is on scope of programs and services. Number 4 is a really important one because it speaks to how we implement our regulatory function as a conservation authority. So for example, the Conservation Authorities Act says CAs may perform a certain function. Some CAs move forward with those, other CAs don't. And when you do decide to move forward something, I need staff management need guidance on the how we're going to do that. So the example I'm tabling with you is in 2017, this board decided to implement wetland policies in our jurisdiction. Not all jurisdictions, not all CAs in Ontario implement certain aspects of the wetland policies. It was a major politically sensitive policy decision of the board for us to do that. And therefore part of the discussions that happened around this table was, okay, if we're going to do that, what does that look like? How are we going to implement those policies? What's the framework that we're going to give staff, quite frankly, the box they're going to operate within if we're going to move forward with this policy decision? And so anytime we change the guidelines on how we implement regulatory matters under the Act, they come before this board to ensure that there's alignment between the board and staff on the intention of the board on how we're to implement those regulations. The next one I wanted to draw your attention to is number 8. And this is where, as the general manager, anything, if I ever thought could have an implication of the board being seen or the organization being seen to be taking a public position on something of another level of government. So for example, at the July meeting, I will be bringing forward 2 documents in relationship to propose regulatory changes at the province. I would never table something, in terms of official comments on behalf of MVCA to the province unless it had gone through this board. So that would be another example of, where there's, to a certain extent, it's discretionary, but I think the way that I've worded this is pretty clear. If there's any implication for MVCA on taking a public stand, that I need to be bringing it to the board. So those are the key ones that I wanted to draw to your attention to. And I guess the question I would pose to you is, do you think this is sufficient? Do you disagree with it? Do you think I've missed anything, et cetera? So that's the end of my presentation.
All right. Any comments or questions for Sally? I'm not seeing anything from anyone. So in a lot of ways, this is a bit of a cleanup process and a way to more clearly enunciate what needs to come to the board for approval. And I think, in the past, there's going to be this policy manual, and that certainly will be approved by the board. It's going to approve its own policies. And we definitely don't want to have the day-to-day operations of having to be approved by the board. So with that, I will read the motion into the record. It's a long motion. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that the Board of Directors, 1, approve the screening criteria contained in this report. 2, direct management to apply the screening criteria to existing board policies and return with the updated documents for information. 3, approve consolidation of all board policies that are not related to the administrative bylaw or the employee manual into a board policy manual. And 4, approve housekeeping edits to the administrative bylaw as set out in attachment 1. So I need someone to move. Looking for a hand. Okay, Roy moves, and need someone to second.
Kathy?
Kathy seconds, so I've got Roy and Kathy. Okay, so before we vote, I do have one comment, and that is that there are a lot of typos in this cut and paste. I mean, a lot. And so somebody needs to really go through the changes with a editorial viewpoint before you do and accept. Okay, that was, yeah, I found there were quite a few of them. With that, any final comments? No? All right. Can I see a show of hands to approve the motion? Looking for hands. All right, the motion is carried. All right, next. We're moving on to, where am I? There we go. Moving on to procurement policy update. And we have a presentation by Stacy.
Good morning. So following up on the process of that Sally just outlined, I'd already started the process on reviewing the procurement policy and did not want to delay bringing this forward. The current purchasing policy and procedures was established in 2006. The only update over the years to that was changing the signing authority on checks, which actually shouldn't be part of the purchasing policy in the first place. It's part of the admin bylaw. The current thresholds that were in there are impeding day-to-day operations as they are quite out of date due to inflation and current market conditions. The policy and procedure also includes a great deal of operational procedures and instructions, including how to calculate the GST at 6%, which is no longer the case. So my proposed amendments include removing all of the process pieces out of the document. I did a review by contacting a number of conservation areas and municipalities asking for their policies to be able to review. I did hear back. I got policies from 2 of our member municipalities and 3 other CAs. I also discovered that the Government of Ontario has a guideline for publicly funded organizations. So I included that in my research. Of the groups that responded to me with their policy, the majority indicated they were out of date and would appreciate my feedback on what I found to look at moving theirs forward. There was also a meeting of all the GMs and they discussed the purchasing policies, and the thresholds and guidelines that we're proposing are in line with what other CAs are hoping to move to. Added from some of the research, an overall set of goals to be guiding our process and thoughts when we're doing purchasing. That was new. In the principles and definitions, there no changes other than removing those items that were specifically process related to that. And I added in a definition for bid to encompass different types of public tendering, because the previous just referred to public tendering, but it may not need to be a whole public tendering. It could be quotes, it could be, so to open that up to allow more options there. The basic limits, I lowered the first limit to 1,000, which just requires program supervisor approval. It previously was 2,500. Then created 1,000 to 10,000, where we've removed it was previously 2,500 to 10,000. Removed the requirement for getting 3 quotes, but still that we should be competitive in trying to get potentially verbal quotes or looking at what the industry is and keeping in mind the policy goals. Trying to get 3 quotes, particularly on smaller dollar amounts, has been proving quite difficult and time consuming, which is holding up operations. The second limit changed to be from 50,000 at the higher end up to 100,000, just for, again, that's one that requires 3 written quotes and also needs to have been within the approved budget for consideration. If it's not within the approved budget, then it does have to come back to the board. And then its purchases above 100,000 is where we have to get into the public bid process. So, and I clarified some of the use around corporate credit cards. Is there any questions?
Paul?
I'm just wondering why you decreased the initial amount. I would think that your supervisor's $2,500 is pretty reasonable for them to have if on an as-need basis.
Again, it was because it also didn't have the looking at being competitive. I was trying to open it that if it's above 1,000, you should be giving consideration to, is it already in the budget? Because the 2,500 didn't have to be part of the budget or any consideration. So I moved it down to if it's under 1,000, it's at the program supervisor's discretion, and then added that from 1,000 to 10,000 does need to be looking at competitive, and is it within the budget already? And if it's not within the budget, that requires GM approval.
Sally?
We could add in another layer if we wanted between, over 1,000, under 20, 500. These levels also were discussed, as Stacy mentioned, at the GM meeting. I can't recall exactly why the 1,000. I have the feeling that might have been because several of the other CAs, that is their limit, is 1,000. So it may have been moving down for us, but that was their base level. Do you recall from your analysis of the other?
I think it was largely because that limit doesn't have to have already been in the budget. That's where some of that is. It could be a completely new item. So if it's over 1,000 and not part of the budget, we want some consideration there.
I guess my thought process would be if it's maintenance for a truck and you blow out a couple of tires that you weren't expecting, sort of thing, You're $1,600 before you even to
We
walk
have-
in the garage door. Now you can't get into a garage door under 1,000.
We do have an amount in the budget for maintenance, so unless they were significantly exceeding their maintenance budget for the year, that's where that thought process was.
All right, any other comments?
On the
Andrew?
level 3, which, yeah, the level 3 goes up to $100,000, which is a moderate amount of money. There's nothing in the policy to explain how requests for quotation are developed for those. Can you just talk to that a little?
Oh, he's asking whether you could explain how a request for quotation is developed, and it may be asking even if how it might be different from a bid process. Is that really what you're
Yeah.
asking? Andrew?
Really, yes, because for the 100,000 and above, it talks to the department manager who's responsible for the bid package, terms of reference and specification. Who does that for the class below?
Really, it's what's the difference between a quotation process and a bid process?
It was really the public nature of it, having to put out the public natures, whereas quote could be, we've got 5 vendors that we're asking for getting and soliciting quotes from versus putting out a public.
Right, so a request for proposal would also be maybe more sophisticated or more complex in terms of what it's asking for and the vendors to reply to.
Right. The difference is the public
The
nature
public
of it.
nature, okay. All right, does that answer your question, Andrew?
Not quite. It's really just how you go about who is responsible for getting these quotations. Are these developed by the are the RFQs for this developed by a program supervisor, department manager, general manager?
Yeah.
Where is the process resident?
Actually, I think Sally wanted to get it involved, so if you could just turn off your mic, Satis, thank you.
So more often than not, if it's under 100,000, I leave it to the managers unless it's more complex, in which case I'll get involved. Mainly because I have more experience in this area than some of the management team today. My expectation is that over time, as they become more comfortable with writing RFQs and RFPs, that I can perform simply a review function. But absolutely, I'm involved with most of the RFQs that are issued today, with the exception of those coming out of engineering and for the smaller contracts out of property management, mainly because that's areas that those managers have experience with.
Sally, is there an operating procedure for how you put together an RFQ and an RFP?
We have a standard template that we use.
All right, Andrew, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm not going to belabor it. It's just that sometimes when you are getting up towards $100,000, these tend to be proposals rather than bids. It's not necessarily a low bid situation, and you have in there that reasons for documenting other than the low quotation must be documented, which implies that there is some form of RFP process that has a number of criteria. But I'm happy to leave things at this level and just is particularly if the board of directors is going to get involved if this is an unusual or unbudgeted item.
Just to direct kind of what I think you're saying, the number previously was 50,000. So maybe Sally can explain why it went from 50 to 100.
So in part, there's a few reasons. One of them is because particularly for some of the smaller projects, and for us, a project under 100,000 is small when you compare it to our large capital projects. So projects under 100,000 are often associated with grants, for instance, WECI, and time is of the essence. So for instance, we'll be working on 2 projects later this year. As it happens, those will be largely performed in-house, but often the requirement to come back to the board is really impedes our ability to get timely quotes on, from people and to get the project on the street, and get going. And because of the nature of the work we perform, our construction season is actually very limited. So that would be one reason. Another reason is because the expertise we have in-house allows us to do this at a higher level, particularly on the engineering side. And we are often hiring consultants to help us with these processes. So, there is a good deal of oversight in these processes. And I guess the feeling is we also bring a lot of information to the board, and we're trying to mitigate the length of our agendas here, and to make sure that the board's engaged on those most critical contracts. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
So yes, did that answer the question, Andrew?
Yeah, okay, I'm comfortable, thanks.
Okay. Are we ready then to go to the resolution? So resolved that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve amendment of the purchasing policy as set out in this report. I need someone to move. Looking for a hand here. Roy? And seconded by Paul. Thank you. Just before we vote, I did again want to make a comment. I really like it when there are changes are shown or embedded in when there are policies or things to review that have been changed, like there was for the previous one, so that you can actually see what has been cut and pasted. And I would just like to ask that in the future that when you do present document changes to the board to approve or to the committees, that we can see what those changes are. I mean, unless they're like you've done a complete rewriting, that would be ridiculous. So, all right, with that, can I see a show of hands? All right, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now we're on to sewers. All right. So we have the headquarters water sewer connection, and we have Scott Lowrick who will be giving us a report. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So a little background information on the headquarter building that we're currently sitting in here. So in 2012, MVCA entered into a development permit agreement with the town of Carleton Place for construction of the building. Essentially, it allowed us to operate on private services for a period of 10 years, excuse me, after the building had been built and municipal services were brought to the property line. So we've been operating on well and septic here for a little over 10 years. At this point, the services have been brought to the property line. For those that have been here, it's actually circled with snow fence out our back door. So within that agreement, it also brought up the proportionate share of costs for municipal services that we would essentially owe the town of Carleton Place. And it states that it'd be the current difference in appraised value between the serviced and unserviced parcels of land that would be applied to this property. So at the point of when the agreement was signed, the difference was $55,000 per acre, which equated to $286,000 that was the estimated share at the time. So to update that number, we retained Rivington Commercial Appraisers Services to be able to update that number. They were actually the original group that provided that estimate. So the current report now states that it's actually $50,000 per acre, which based on the report works out to $251,500, which is so based on the assessment, it's recommended that the board authorize payment of this amount to the town of Carleton Place in fulfillment of the development permit agreement. It should be noted that there has been a fair amount, I think, of turnover at the town of Carleton Place, and I think they're somewhat unfamiliar with the agreement that was signed in 2012. They've actually suggested that we work with their current supplier of the company. It's Kavanaugh that's building the the new subdivision over there to work with them on what we would owe Kavanaugh on a cost share. We have no signed agreement with Kavanaugh, nor do we have any real involvement with that. So we recommend against deviation from the agreement. So the next part is, I guess, the updated cost estimate. So in the 2023 capital budget, we had 357,500 for the connection for the water and sewer. So that was updated through inflation. So we are currently working with an engineering firm, JP2G. They're going to work with us to finalize the layout plan for the project. At which point, once that comes to, its final stages, we'll have a better idea of estimated cost. And at which point we will also be able to tender the project to get firm costs on that. However, I feel that the number that was in the current capital plan did not have the cost share agreement with the town of Carleton Place in it. So I think it's going to be significantly higher than what's in that budget. So as for, I guess, to tie everything up, so our next steps, so the town of Carleton Place is going to be informed of the property assessment and the updated numbers that we have. We'll probably end up having to meet with them to discuss that. We will continue to work with our engineering firm to finalize the plans and complete the design for the project to issue a tender. And then upon identification of a preferred bidder, staff will return to the board to inform the board of the bid costs or the contract and hopefully proceed with the loan agreement at that point as well.
Thank you, Scott. Now open for questions. Any questions? Yes, Andrew?
Yes. I understand that when the connection is done, we can expect to pay a proportionate share of that. But I'm afraid I did get a bit lost in the explanation of the first item here. And what is the difference between the 2012 assessment and the 2023 assessment? I'm just not following how we went from having a $250,000 number before to having a $250,000 now, and we have to pay that entire amount. That's what was agreed to back in 2012.
Yeah, as what's written in the agreement, that's how it's stated, was the difference in costs from the what would be an unserviced parcel of land on a per acre basis to a fully serviced parcel of land. It's how it was written in the agreement. So just in order to, the terminology in the agreement is somewhat up to interpretation. So it says the current value, which we would assume would be modern day 2023 numbers, is the reason why we got the updated current value. I was a little shocked to see the price actually go down. But I guess it's better in our favor, but that's how it's written out in the agreement, is the cost share is what we would owe the town of Carleton Place based on those numbers.
But the two bullet points here, the first one says MVCA will be expected to connect to these services and contribute their proportionate share of the cost of these services. And then the second bullet seems to clarify what the proportionate share of the costs will be, which is this difference in appraised value. So what I'm not seeing is why we have to pay both. Or we have to pay it twice. We say that when we get the capital cost for the connection, we will be paying a large amount for that. But what it says in the agreement, or what it seems to say in the agreement by my reading of it, is that that amount is capped essentially at this difference in appraised value. So why are we paying both?
So that cost share agreement is just to get the services to the actual property line. The way we understand it to read out is we are then responsible for the share of the cost to get at the property line, and then from the property line and hooking our building up is solely on us.
Okay, so it's the two different bits then, one to get it to the property line and then one to get it beyond the property line.
Yeah,
That's-
exactly.
Okay, that's what to me was not clear in the background.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions? Because what we're asking for is an increase to the capital budget. And I believe that Sally, I think you're asking that we be able to address this increase through a loan, potentially a loan, rather than
That's
putting
correct.
it on the levy. capital
That's
levy.
correct.
All right, any comments on that? All right, I will read the resolution. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that the board authorize an increase to the 2023 budget, other capital, HQ sewer and water connection project from $357,500 to $609,000 plus HST to address the cost of bringing municipal services to the property line. And two, authorize payment of $251,500 to the town of Carleton Place in fulfillment of the 2012 development permit agreement for the extension of municipal services to the MVCA property line. And three, authorize securement of a loan for the HQ sewer and water connection project. And four, authorize the general manager and or treasurer to negotiate financing terms for a loan with the Infrastructure Ontario or member municipality. So I need someone to move. So Paul so moves, and Kathy Curry seconds.
Sorry, just before we do move to the vote,
Yes.
Reading this resolution again, then I'm afraid I do have to raise my question again, because both items 1 and 2 of the recommendation are addressing the bringing the municipal services to the property line.
Yes, and I think, Andrew, that's because, as Scott said, the $251,500 was not included in the capital budget. The capital budget only included from the property line to the building.
But neither of these are,
The budget, the capital budget included the cost to bring the service from the property line to the building. So the reason that you're seeing the cost of bringing municipal services to the property line in one is because we're adding the 251,000 to the 251,500 to the capital budget, and we're authorizing then payment of that amount to the town of Carleton Place.
sorry, I'm obviously being dense this morning. That 251 is the difference between 357 and 609.
I hope so. Just quickly looking at the, I think it is, yes. All right.
Yeah, okay, understood. I'll shut up.
Okay. No, it's best that you're comfortable. That's the important thing before we vote. So can I see a show of hands? All in favor? All right.
Aye.
I'm going to assume you're in favor. All right.
Yeah, sorry, I'm flipping between different screens on this, so I can't get back in fast enough. I'll put both hands in the air now.
All right. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. All right. Sewer can always be so exciting. Now, we're on to our next item, which is the education program reinstatement. And it looks like, Scott, you'll be giving us a report.
Thank you. So shortly after its establishment, MVCA developed an education program for school-age children, and the program ran through to 2020 when the pandemic got in the way of a lot of things, and this program was no different. At that time, the board directed that further analysis be carried out prior to the program reinstatement, and if MVCA could deliver the program within the financial constraints of the new regulatory environment, and whether the current service delivery method was best way to achieve MVCA's strategic priorities and educational objectives. So at the May 2023 board meeting, staff tabled a proposal to reinstate the program on a seasonal basis with the goal of at least 50% be self-funded through fees, and hopefully by the end of the fourth year, it'd be 100% self-sustaining and fully recovered program. So the proposed budget of $20,000 would allow for hiring a program coordinator and cover out-of-pocket expenses with other staff cost recovery through registration fees. So the board deferred the matter to its July meeting with the direction for staff to provide more information. So a little background on the program itself. So in the Mill of Kintail Master Plan, which was the last one was updated in 2008, it does focus quite a bit on the educational programming and how important it is to the authority and also to that property. So it talks about to provide continued conservation and management of historical buildings, natural resources, interpret local history, and provide high quality educational and recreational experiences. Excuse me. It goes on to talk about to broaden the sources and amounts of revenue from activities and that complement the primary functions of the site, to financially support core programs and strengthen the relationship with the community at large. So it had been a very important program, again, up until COVID put a cap on that. To go on to talk about it, it talks about the in 2019, there was a presentation to the board that the full program was offered, and in summary, after many years of operation, over 60 schools had participated in some form of educational programming, with an average of 2,500 children engaged annually. The cost to deliver a year-round program exceeded $100,000 per year, which was primarily for compensation of a full-time educational coordinator, and approximately 33% of the total costs were recovered through program fees. So we have been approached in recent years. Something was brought up about looking at third parties to operate from the site. And some of this was obviously before my time, but in talking with Sally, she said that we have been approached in recent years of interested parties, but nothing was ever really formalized, and it really didn't get off the ground. So in 2022, RVCA actually ran a couple weeks of summer camps out of the Mill of Kintail with their staff, and they hired some local staff to be able to help facilitate those programs. They were not able to do that this year, and I think it revolved around them not being able to get staff that were local enough to be able to make the trips. So they found that travel was a bit of an impediment for them to be able to run that program for us. But I do see the value in continuing to run those summer camp programs. I really do think it would be a big program for not only for the authority, but for the Mill of Kintail property itself. I've been involved in running summer camp in a bit of a different capacity, more around the sports camp side of things, but I have seen the exposure it can give for an organization, but also the revenue it can drive for a particular organization as well. So with that, we have been seeking grants for both the review and the design of the educational program. So the MVC Foundation has committed $10,000 in 2023 towards the development of a curricular-based materials, and a submission has been made to the Danby Foundation for matching dollars. So a decision from Danby is expected later this month. And then in terms of the corporate strategic plan, delivery of an educational program, support achievement of the following goals and objectives, excuse me. So community building, again, it would help draw a lot of people to the site, which, that's always our main focus, is how to draw more people to our sites. And I really think an educational program would definitely be very helpful from the mill standpoint. It would demonstrate the MVCA to be trusted, client-centered, resourceful, and a helpful partner within the community, and strengthen relationships with municipalities, community stakeholders, First Nations, the agricultural sector, developers, not-for-profits, and academia. Excuse me.
Great. So we open up for comments.
Love it. That's my only comment.
Well, any other comments?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We did something like this in York Region, and it's wonderful.
All right, Andrew?
Very happy with going ahead with this. Hopefully we'll be successful in raising the money. The matching money or the additional money.
Paul? Nothing? Okay. Because I do have a few comments. I'm actually kind of confused on what we're voting on for this $20,000. And I think when this was before the board, we wanted to actually have a report come back that actually looked at the alternatives and what they might cost or what revenue they might generate. Like, I honestly think that this is really coming back to the board with the same thing that you almost presented before, except with a little more background. I think my second comment is that it should be identified that this is a category 3 item, which means this is an additional cost potentially to the municipalities. It's not a category 1 or a category 2. And I guess the third item would be, we already have overstretched staff. And now we're adding a category 3 non-mandatory item to the Conservation Authority. And another fourth comment would be that I was at the MVCA Foundation meeting, and that $10,000 was to pay somebody with a background in education to review the program options. And so I'm not sure what this means about development of curriculum-based materials, because I don't think that came up in the MVC on the foundation meeting. And so honestly, I almost think that this resolution is premature to bring to the board, because what I think you need to do is you need to spend the $10,000 that the foundation has given on a consultant or whatever to come back with the options. Like, what should MVCA be in the education business, or should it be potentially contracting with somebody so that your revenue is coming from a third party offering the sources? Like, I haven't even seen that. What are the options for third parties other than just a general conversation? So I honestly, and you guys can outvote me, but I honestly have real problems even bringing this motion back to the board in its current rather vague state. Those are my comments. And Kathy?
So I love the concept. I mean, I guess I wasn't aware of all of that, but well, unfortunately, I actually have to go and give 2 awards to someone in about 3 minutes. So I don't know if you want to put this, if you want to refer it. I mean, I find this committee and these boards here very much like by consensus, like, you know, I don't like people outvoting other people. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to have a further conversation when I'm not here, or you want to just refer this to the next meeting so we can have a longer discussion. I'm really sorry that I have to go because people are waiting on me to present.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, we can decide to take this to the board in its current state, or we can decide to take it to the board modified so that the board knows really what it's voting on, because what's this $20,000 for, really? On top of the fact that the foundation is you're supposed to be doing a review that then says, I want $20,000. You see what I'm saying? I almost feel like this is premature to what that review is supposed to be. Yes, Sally.
So the issue that we discussed at the last board meeting is that I'm in the process of tabling for the City of Ottawa's approval, category 2 and 3 programs and services. And quite frankly, time is of the essence. We don't have the time and luxury to do a full review that 10,000 is going to conduct before I need to table the business case to the City of Ottawa. And it's the approval of the city that's holding up the approval from all the other municipalities, because until the city buys in, nobody else is prepared to. So my understanding coming out of the last board meeting was to put more flesh on the bone of what was being proposed so that the board could consider, does it feel comfortable me including this as a new category 3 item in the proposal being put before the city of Ottawa? And literally working with RVCA and South Nation on that this week, and we're hoping to meet with them next week. So that is why there was urgency, and we didn't have the time to conduct the full review that the foundation has graciously approved to fund.
Question then, does this have to go in a category 3 in 2023, or can it go to the city in 2024 after we've had more time to look at it?
So the regulation says that if you're proposing to change any programs and services within the duration of the category 2 and 3 contract, that you identify it during this process. It doesn't actually prescribe opportunity for amendment. I'm not saying that's not possible, but that's not how the regulation reads.
All right, so could you clarify what the $20,000 that you want for, is it 2023 budget? You want the 20,000?
No, the 20,000 is proposed to be introduced in 2024. It's too late for us to move forward with this program this year.
Okay, and could you clarify what the $20,000 is exactly for?
It's to hire a more mature university student to help us organize and launch the program, and then to oversee the summer students that we'd hired to actually deliver the program. And the summer students would be funded through the actual camp fees.
Okay, so if we take this to the board and you get even approval, you take it to the city and it's part of what the package they approved for category 3, the board still has the discretion on what it wants to do with an education program in 2024.
That's correct.
Okay, then I'm comfortable taking this back to the board. I personally am, for further discussion and review, so that, I mean, it's not my decision. I think it's the board's decision. So are there any other comments or questions? Thank you. All right, so I will read the resolution quickly while Kathy's still here. Resolve that the Board of Directors approve reinstatement of a nature education program in 2024 at an estimated annual cost of $20,000 as a category 3 program. Can I see someone to move? So Kathy moves. I need someone to second. I'll
Seconded.
say, I think Andrew's hand was up first. Might be that speedy internet connection again. So can I see a show of hands? All in favor? 1, 2, 3. And I have, would you like to be on record at all, Paul? No? All right. So we'll say the motion is carried.
Right. Sorry, I have to run.
All right. Thank you, Kathy, for showing up here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So our final item is the election of a vice chair. I noticed Kathy quickly escaped. So the job of the vice chair is really, in this particular case, it's not really like the board where you need to be in on the meetings, but I guess the role of the vice chair is really to be, if I'm not available, is to be able to run this meeting, to I would say stay maybe a little more on top of the financial activities than otherwise. And I think if you wanted to move into the position of chair in the future, the vice chair is a really good position to get started in. I mean, that's how I started. No, did I do vice chair of this one? I can't remember now. No, I think I just sat in the meetings. I can't even remember anymore. This is, I was either chair or vice chair. I can't remember. Anyway, but it's still a good position to get if you're interested in taking on what I consider to be extremely important role in the Conservation Authority. So I really am, it's either, I mean, I can try to give calls to some of the other people who are on the list, but are Roy or Andrew, either of you interested? No? It's okay.
No, Andrew, are you interested?
I am suffering from overload at the moment, so it would.
So am I.
it would
So I think we all are. I
Yeah.
can
So
put,
until I do get my broadband internet connection and have high speed, then I prefer not to. But if Paul, please say what you were going to say next.
Roy. Go ahead, Roy.
I'm just saying, if nobody puts their name for it, I'll be happy to assist.
All right, so I love the enthusiasm. So I nominate Roy Hudel. And I guess Kathy, you need to do, or Kathy, I keep doing that. I'm sorry. Sally, if you could go through the process then. I'm in the position now. Okay, so I have to do a call. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? I do it 3 times. Are there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, motion to close the election. I need someone to move.
So moved.
Okay, Andrew moves. I need someone to second. Paul seconds. All in favor, closing the motion, closing the election. Motion carried. So thank you, Roy. You have now been acclaimed. Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Roy, do you take on the role of vice chair of the Finance and Administration Committee?
And I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you. We are now proclaimed vice chair. Thank you very much for serving. All right. We're now at the end of the meeting. So are there any other business, Scully? No, nothing? Okay. And so resolved that the board, I don't have a resolved that the board of directors call the meeting to a close. I need someone to move. Paul so moves. Somebody second. We've got Roy seconds. All in favor. Thank you very much,
Bye.
everybody. Nice to see you today. Enjoy the weather.
Thank you.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your day.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Rachel is, oh, I guess